I still remember that night so clearly. The night when I believed that just a few more hours and I would get to see my son, Evan, begin a new and happy life. I had kept things simple, a pastel tone coat, a small gift box, and the excitement swelling in my chest. The rehearsal dinner was held at a glowing Italian restaurant bathed in warm golden light. Guests were laughing and talking, glasses clinking together in a pleasant rhythm that seemed to signal a joyful day ahead. I had barely stepped inside when Melissa, the future bride, the woman I had tried so hard to love, spotted me. She smiled, a perfect magazine cutout kind of smile. But her eyes didn't smile with her. Before I could offer my congratulations, Melissa touched my hand lightly and pulled me to a dim corner behind the door that led into the kitchen. Dark enough to make someone uneasy, yet bright enough for me to see the icy look in her eyes. She leaned in, the scent of her expensive perfume washing over me, strong, sharp, unfamiliar. "Starting tomorrow," she said slowly, almost in a whisper, "you're no longer family, and I don't want to see you at the wedding. Don't show up and embarrass me." Each word landed in my ears like metal hitting metal. No screaming, no public insult, just calculated cruelty, the kind people only use when they know no one else can hear except their target. I froze. My hand gripping the gift bag trembled with each beat. Outside that door, the music played softly, and everyone else kept laughing and chatting happily. No one knew that in that dark little corner, in just a few seconds, my world had shifted off its axis. And Melissa, she stepped back, smoothed her dress, and walked back to the crowd with that flawless smile, as if nothing had ever happened. In that very moment, I knew this was only the beginning of something I had never imagined I would have to face. If you've ever lived through a moment that tightens your chest like that, stay with me until the end. This is where we share real stories, hard-earned lessons, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this story. When I left the restaurant that night, I drove as if I were floating outside my own body. Everything blurred in front of me, and my mind was spinning. But on the way home, in the middle of that numbness, I remembered the years when just thinking of my son gave me enough strength to stand upright. Maybe that's why the memories rose up one after another, clear as if they had happened yesterday. 26 years ago, I was a young woman holding my 6-year-old son in front of the shabby apartment whose rent made me break into a sweat every month. Evan was so small back then, barely half the size he is now, his eyes bright and clear, his little hands clutching my shirt. That night, his father left without a word. He left behind nothing but an empty space and childish questions I didn't know how to answer without breaking my own heart. From that point on, it was just the two of us leaning on each other to survive. I worked the night shift at the hospital, handling kitchen duties and cleaning rooms. My shift stretched from late afternoon until nearly dawn. I still remember the smell of burnt onions in that industrial kitchen, the clatter of metal carts rolling across the floor, and the heavy exhaustion settling in my bones as I left the hospital just when the first sunlight appeared. When I got home, I barely had time to change out of my uniform before waking Evan for school. There were mornings I was so tired I fell asleep right on the sofa, and my little boy would cover me with the thin blanket he used every night while watching cartoons. Those years were anything but easy, yet each time I looked at Evan's drawings pinned to the wall, most of them showing the two of us holding hands, I found the strength to keep going. Our small apartment always had a corner dedicated to his drawings. Sheets of A4 paper taped up with old bits of tape, edges curling from age. But to me, they were a whole universe, because each picture told me my child was still okay, still happy, even if life wasn't gentle with us. When Evan was 12, something happened that I still carry a bit of guilt about. One afternoon, after an overtime shift, I came home to find an envelope at the door. The moment I saw the handwriting, I knew whose it was. His father. The man who once promised to always be there, yet chose to disappear the moment we needed him most. I didn't plan to open it, but I did. The content was only a few short lines, that he regretted everything, that his new life wasn't what he had imagined, that he wanted to meet his son someday. I sat with that paper for a long time, my heart tangled like a bundle of old wires. But in the end, I folded the letter and tucked it into the very bottom of a drawer. Evan was doing his homework in his room, and I was terrified it would hurt him more. Terrified he would feel abandoned twice if his father changed his mind again. I carried that secret for many years, telling myself I only wanted to protect him. However, I still wonder sometimes whether it was the right thing to do. Those memories washed over me, and my heart sank. Melissa could say I was no longer family, but I knew exactly who I had spent my entire life trying to protect. I always believed that if I worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, Evan would have a fuller, happier life than the one I had lived. I never wanted to be the reason his future fell apart. But right then, beneath the sting of humiliation, I felt a vague uneasiness rising, a sense that tonight was only a tiny part of the storm our family was about to face. And even though I was exhausted after all these years, I knew I might have to stand up one more time. Looking back, I realized that what happened at the rehearsal dinner wasn't unexpected at all. Everything had started a long time ago. I had just chosen to ignore it because I didn't want to create more distance between my son and me. From the day Evan first brought Melissa home to meet me, I already felt she had two faces. In front of Evan, she acted gentle, composed, a bit overly polished, but still charming. But every time Evan stepped out of the room to take a call or get more water, Melissa's expression shifted completely. Cold, sharp, impatient. The kind of look that made me feel like a burden, even though I had said nothing beyond a few polite greetings. I recall a moment from Evan's birthday last year. I had made a chocolate cake, the same kind he'd loved since he was 10. When I brought it out, Evan smiled and hugged me, just like he did every year. But Melissa tilted her head and said with a syrupy, sweet tone, "It looks cute, but Evan's on a new diet. Let me handle it. He won't eat that." She picked up the knife and pushed the cake aside as if it were some redundant dessert at a restaurant. I stood there, slightly startled, but because Evan squeezed my hand to reassure me, I forced a smile and let it go, even though a minor ache settled in my chest. When the two of them moved in together, every time Melissa came to my place, the apartment was filled with the overpowering scent of her expensive perfume, so strong that my small home felt overtaken. I didn't dislike the smell itself. It just felt like it smothered everything familiar to me, as if everything I had needed to make room for her world. Then came the scrapbook. I had spent weeks choosing photos, printing them, and adding little notes so Evan could one day tell Melissa about his childhood. But when I handed her the scrapbook for the first time, Melissa just glanced at it and said, "Oh, I'll look at it later. It's cute, but I have a lot going on." Her voice had no warmth in it, as if I had handed her a promotional catalog. At that moment, I reminded myself not to be picky. Maybe I was from another generation, used to living more slowly. She was young, with her own priorities. But each time we met, that sense of distance grew, no matter how hard I tried to bridge it. Sometimes I caught little things that made me stop and think. One time, when I dropped by their apartment to bring Evan some documents, I noticed an unfamiliar pair of men's shoes near the door. Melissa quickly said they belonged to a coworker who had stopped by for work-related discussions. I didn't think much of it, but the way her eyes darted away stuck with me. There were also nights when I brought food to Evan after my shift, and Melissa would take calls in the kitchen, whispering. When she walked back out, her smile looked strained. I never tried to listen, but I heard the name of a man who wasn't Evan's coworker more than once. All those signs, I brushed them aside because I didn't want to believe something was wrong. I thought that if I stayed quiet, everything would eventually fall into place. But now, looking back, those signs were warnings I hadn't dared to face. And soon, all of them would turn into a real storm, a storm none of us could have predicted. That night, as I left the rehearsal dinner, I drove home in silence. On the entire drive, Melissa's words kept replaying in my mind like a line carved into stone. Starting tomorrow, you're no longer family. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't fall. All I felt was a squeezing pain in my chest. My small apartment was on the 3rd floor. I had lived there for nearly 20 years, every corner holding a piece of the life my son and I had built. When I opened the door, memories seemed to rush out to greet me. The old drawings Evan had made as a child, still taped to the wall, the worn dining table where we had shared countless bowls of instant noodles, and the framed photo of Evan's high school graduation, sitting on the first shelf. I set my bag on the chair, took off my shoes, and sat down without turning on the light, letting the darkness wrap around me as if I needed it to catch my breath. After a while, I stood up and opened the closet. The light blue dress I had bought for the wedding hung neatly in the back of the closet. A soft shade of blue, not flashy, but Evan had once seen it and said it suited me. When I bought it, I pictured myself sitting in the front row, watching my son walk down the aisle with the woman he loved. I reached out and touched the fabric, soft, smooth, slightly cool against my fingertips. The sensation made my throat tighten. All the beautiful hopes I had built suddenly felt distant. My phone on the kitchen counter started vibrating. Once, twice, then continuously. I glanced at the screen, messages from Evan. "Mom, are you home safely? Are you okay?" Then a call, then another. I knew that if I picked up, I'd hear my son's voice, worried, loving. And because of that, I couldn't bring myself to answer. I was afraid that hearing Evan speak would make me force myself to endure one more day for him. I was afraid I would pretend to be strong just so he wouldn't worry. I placed the phone face down on the table. It still buzzed against my palm as I held it tightly. A long while passed before I said out loud, hoarse and barely above a whisper, as if confirming it for myself, "Tomorrow, I won't go." The words echoed softly through the quiet apartment, gentle but heavy enough to make my heart sink. For 26 years, I had never missed a single milestone in Evan's life. His first day of school, his fevers, his exams, his graduation ceremonies. Not once, but now, I understood that showing up at the wedding only to endure the contempt of the woman about to become my daughter-in-law was something I no longer had the strength to survive. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the phone slip from my hand. It wasn't that I didn't love my son. It was then that, in that moment, I knew I couldn't take another wound. A person can sacrifice much in a lifetime, but even silence has its limit. I took a deep breath, then lay down, trying to reassure myself that this decision wasn't meant to hurt Evan. It was simply to protect whatever little piece of myself I still had left. I didn't know that this very decision would lead to a truth that would shake the entire city just a few hours later. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, even though I had barely slept. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, soft but enough to remind me that today was supposed to be my son's happy day. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, still feeling the uneasiness from the night before. Outside the window, neighbors were heading to their cars. I heard Mr. Stevens from the floor below calling up, "Mrs. Helen, are you riding with us today?" I cracked the door open, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not going." The couple exchanged a confused look. "You're not going? It's your son's wedding." I only shook my head, offering no explanation. I knew that if I said the real reason out loud, I wouldn't be able to hold myself together. When they left, the hallway fell silent again, but my apartment didn't. My phone vibrated nonstop. Texts, calls, then more texts. The caller ID was clear. Evan. The first message, "Mom, where are you? The ceremony starts in 2 hours." Then the second, sounding more urgent, "Mom, don't make me worry, call me." The third, "Melissa said you weren't feeling well last night. Are you okay? Please answer me." I leaned against the kitchen counter, my hand gripping the phone. I wanted to call back. I truly did, just to hear my son's voice and reassure him. But I knew that if I heard even one word from Evan, my resolve would crumble. I would put on that light blue dress again and show up at the wedding with a forced smile. I set the phone face down on the table and sat down, taking deep breaths to stay calm. Meanwhile, at the church, everything was unfolding in a direction no one could have predicted. St. Matthew's Church was beautifully decorated that morning. Sunlight shining through the stained glass windows cast long beams of color across the aisle. Nearly half the pews were already filled. Soft chatter echoed through the space. Evan was in the preparation room with his best man, Kyle. Both were dressed in sharp suits. Evan kept checking his watch, anxiety written plainly on his face. "My mom isn't here yet," Evan said, voice tight. Kyle patted his shoulder. "She's probably just stuck in traffic. Don't stress." But before the reassurance could sink in, the door swung open. Kyle frowned at his phone. Several new notifications had just popped up. Then his face went pale. "Evan, you need to see this." He held the phone in front of Evan. On the screen was a series of photos of Melissa. Not old photos, but ones taken just weeks earlier. She was standing very close to a man in a white shirt, his hand resting on her waist. They were embracing, almost intimately, in the company's parking lot. Evan stared at the images. His lips trembled and his hands dropped to his sides. "No, this can't be real." Kyle spoke quietly. "The guy who sent these is Melissa's neighbor. He said you needed to know the truth before it's too late." The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately, heavy, suffocating. Outside, the church bells chimed to signal that the ceremony was about to begin, but inside, time seemed to stop. Evan looked at his friend, then back at the photos. Confusion quickly gave way to a kind of pain that was hard to describe. Meanwhile, outside the room, murmurs began spreading among the guests. Some checked their phones, then exchanged startled glances, as if news was spreading faster than the church bells themselves. No one knew that those photos were only the beginning of a chaos that would sweep the entire wedding away. As Evan stared at the photos Kyle showed him, I'm certain he already knew deep down that this wasn't a misunderstanding or coincidence. But human nature, when standing on the brink of a significant turning point, clings to any last shred of hope. Evan was no different. He repeated something that made no sense. Maybe they're just friends. But he knew, even before he finished the sentence, that it wouldn't hold. Among the photos Kyle received, one stood out clearly. Melissa, tilting her head, smiling at the man in a way she had never smiled at Evan. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and familiar. It only took a few seconds for Evan to recognize him. It was Mr. Donovan, the CEO of the company where Melissa worked, the same man she often described as a very easygoing and talented boss. Sometimes Evan had told me Melissa often came home late because of an important project and that her boss frequently needed her help at the last minute. I remembered the time I accidentally overheard Melissa on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice hushed, tense. When she saw me, she hung up immediately and said it was just a work call. I hadn't thought much of it then, only felt something wasn't quite right. Another time, I saw the man from the photos, Mr. Donovan, standing close to Melissa in the parking lot. Too close to be casual. I remember how startled she looked when she saw me, then quickly explained he was asking about project progress. Looking back now, that explanation feels too smooth compared to how flustered she was. The truth hit Evan far too quickly and far too cruelly. But what nearly broke him wasn't just the photos. It was what Kyle said next. "Evan, I also got this." Kyle opened an attached document. It was a draft of a prenuptial agreement that Melissa's family had prepared. Evan once told me Melissa said the prenup was just to make us both feel secure, but he'd never seen the final version. This one was different. detailed, lengthy, and anything but harmless. One clause stood out so boldly that it was shocking. For the first 5 years of marriage, 65% of Evan's income would be transferred into a joint account managed by Melissa and her father. Kyle looked up, his expression serious. "Evan, this isn't protection. This is taking control." Evan blinked, struggling to breathe evenly. Why would there be something like this?" Kyle lowered his voice. "Melissa's father is in heavy debt. I asked someone I know in finance. Their family business is on the brink of collapsing." Evan stumbled back slightly. The back of a chair was the only thing keeping him from collapsing entirely. Suddenly, every piece Evan had once dismissed as minor rearranged itself into a complete picture. Melissa's late nights, the whispered phone calls, how she avoided talking about her family, the way she insisted Evan not worry about the prenup, saying, "Let me handle it." None of it was a passing feeling anymore. It was the truth, a raw, painful, calculated truth. Behind Melissa's coldness toward me wasn't just personal dislike. It was resentment, because I didn't fit into the financial plan they were constructing. And Evan, the person I had devoted my entire life to protecting, now stood right in the center of that trap without realizing it. Whispers spread rapidly through the church. Texts, photos, rumors, everything hit at once. It was as if a door had burst open, unleashing chaos no one could control. But that chaos was still not the worst part. The worst part was waiting for Evan in the bridal room. Evan couldn't remember how he had walked from the groom's preparation room into the bridal suite. He only knew one thing. He had to hear it from Melissa herself. Not from Kyle, not from the neighbor, not from the photos. From her. The bridal door opened to reveal Melissa standing before the mirror, her white wedding gown trailing across the floor. Her shoulders trembled slightly. Whether from nerves or from hurriedly touching up her makeup was unclear. A few bridesmaids hovered nearby, chatting softly until they saw Evan enter. The room fell utterly silent. Melissa turned, her face instantly shifting into the gentle smile she always reserved for Evan. "My love, why did you come in without knocking? The ceremony—" Her sentence cut off when Evan held his phone up in front of her, the screen bright with the photos Kyle had just sent. No shouting, no dramatic anger. Evan's voice was low but clear enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Explain." Melissa glanced at the screen for a single second. 1 second was all it took for her expression to harden, then immediately slip into bewilderment. "Evan, this isn't what you think." Evan didn't answer. He just stared at her. That look made Melissa swallow. She tried to step closer, her voice coated in the familiar sweetness. "These are old photos. I was just talking about work with my boss. Someone took them to try to hurt me. You don't understand." Evan lowered his eyes, breathed in, then said slowly, "These photos were taken 2 weeks ago." Melissa's face changed completely. She glanced around as if searching for a way to escape the confrontation, but all the bridesmaids took a step back. "All right," Melissa said, her tone sharpening. "I admit there's something between me and Mr. Donovan, but it was only a momentary feeling. I still choose you. You have to look at the whole picture, not just these photos." Evan clenched his phone in his hand. "The whole picture." He gave a bitter laugh, the kind of laugh I believe Evan never wanted to make in his life. "What is your whole picture?" Melissa realized she was losing control. Her voice grew harsh. "Evan, you're being manipulated. People are jealous of us. Who benefits most if we break up?" A long silence stretched. Then Evan asked a question Melissa hadn't expected. "Why did you tell my mother that she's not family anymore?" It was as if someone had muted the room. No one moved. No one breathed heavily. Melissa stood frozen, momentarily stunned. Then she blinked and tried to regain composure. You believe her over me. Evan cut her off. "Don't call my mother that." Melissa's eyes went wide. Clearly, she hadn't thought Evan knew about that, and she certainly didn't expect that line to hurt him more than the photos. He continued, voice tight but resolute. My mother gave up everything to raise me. You have no right to say those things to her. Melissa faltered, then bristled, attempting to seize control. Evan, your mother never liked me. She interferes in our affairs. I only set boundaries. Evan looked at her for a long time. That looks like it closed every door between them. He said softly but plainly, if you truly loved me, you wouldn't try to erase my mother. Another hush fell over the room. Melissa retreated, unable to add anything. Evan turned and walked out. The bridal door closed behind him, leaving confusion inside and a future shattered just moments before the ceremony was to begin. Evan stepped out of the bridal suite with a stunned face, but eyes clearer than ever. All his efforts to remain calm up to that point had condensed into a decision he could no longer delay. As he walked down the aisle, the whispering from the guests seemed to swell with every step. The church doors opened onto a long aisle, and the rows of pews were filled with people waiting for the ceremony to begin. The background music still played softly, but the murmurs had crept in, like a small wave spreading through the room. Evan stopped in the middle of the aisle, exactly where he should have been walking with Melissa in a few minutes. Kyle stood behind him, but said nothing. He knew this was a moment Evan had to face alone. A few guests noticed Evan's unusual expression and fell silent. Gradually, the whole church grew still. Evan took a deep breath, then spoke in a voice that trembled but was firm. This ceremony, Wentawi, will not take place. An audible "oh" rose from somewhere. Then the church erupted into chatter. Evan continued, his voice a little hoarse but composed. I cannot marry someone who does not respect me, and who does not respect my family. The words hit like an arrow, short, clear, and enough to make everyone grasp that something severe had happened. The church's back door burst open. Melissa's family rushed in, faces frantic. Melissa followed, still in her wedding dress. She hurried up to Evan. You can't do this. Evan, listen to me. But Evan didn't look at her. Melissa's father immediately stepped into the aisle, his voice sharp. Evan, you are humiliating my daughter in front of everyone. Who is to blame? Who is influencing you? As if rehearsed, he pointed at the familiar target. Did your mother say something to you? She's always trying to ruin things. The commotion doubled. Melissa lunged forward, crying out, I know your mother doesn't like me. She always tries to drive us apart. Evan, think about it. This is her doing. By now, the church was splitting into sides. Some people looked at Evan suspiciously. Others pulled out phones and started recording the chaos. A group of younger guests muttered, Oh my God, the groom's mom must have caused this. I heard she's really controlling. No one really knew what had happened, but the bride's family's accusations spread quickly. Morgan, the bridesmaid and Melissa's close friend, whispered to the person next to her. Melissa was stressed about Evan's mother yesterday. I don't know what they argued about, but it looked serious. Within minutes, social media lit up. Guests live-streamed Melissa in her wedding dress, tears streaming down her face as Evan stood apart, an invisible wall separating them. The captions appeared exactly the way Melissa would want. The groom ran away. The groom's mother is suspected. Then a post was shared dozens of times within the hour. Difficult mother ruins her son's wedding. Poor bride in tears. The news spread so fast that I, sitting alone in my small apartment, began receiving messages from acquaintances. Helen, what's going on? Why are people saying you ruined the wedding? Look at the posts online. Have you seen them? I opened my phone and skimmed the cruel headlines appearing. No one knew the truth. No one knew what had happened behind the bridal suite door. Only one thing was sure. Evan's life, and mine, had entered a new whirlpool, a whirlpool none of us had been prepared for. That afternoon, while I was still sitting alone in my quiet apartment trying to understand what was happening, the doorbell rang. I thought it was a neighbor checking in, but when I opened the door, I saw a man in a suit handing me a thick envelope. His face was stern, as if he were used to tense situations. "Mrs. Helen Porter?" "Yes. This is a legal notice. I need your signature." I took the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. The man turned and walked away immediately, leaving me standing in the hallway with the uneasy feeling that something worse was waiting for me. When I returned inside, I opened the envelope. The first page hit me like a blow. Notice of lawsuit, unlawful interference in a marriage and infliction of emotional distress. I was so shocked I had to steady myself against the table. My eyes landed on the plaintiff's name, the Hayes family, Melissa's parents. They were accusing me of ruining the wedding, manipulating Evan, spreading hatred, and destroying their daughter's future. Every word felt like a needle to the chest. I sat down, feeling like I had suddenly gone from an honest, ordinary woman to a villain in someone else's story. I was trying to steady my breathing when the door knocked again. This time, it was Evan. He stood there with red eyes, still wearing his suit. The moment he saw me, Evan nearly collapsed into my arms, holding me as if he had been holding himself together all day. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His voice cracked. Before I could say anything, he pulled me to the couch. "They're spreading rumors everywhere. I checked online. They're saying you ruined the wedding. Melissa posted too. I don't know how to respond." I looked at my son and saw not only the pain of betrayal on his face, but also a hint of doubt, directed at himself, not at me. That hurt me more than any accusation. I asked quietly, "Do you think I did any of that?" Evan shook his head instantly. "No, you didn't, but I should have defended you from the beginning. I was wrong." He gripped my hand so tightly it hurt, but I didn't pull away, partly because I knew he needed something firm to hold on to, and partly because after so many years as a single mother, I understood something simple. Sometimes adults don't need apologies. They just need to see their child's heart clearly. But in that moment, Evan said something that tightened my chest the most. "Mom, I don't know how to keep you from getting dragged into this." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Evan, I've lived more than half my life. I can handle this. What I'm afraid of is you letting outsiders shape how you see your own family." Those words made Evan lower his head, as if he had just realized a lesson everyone should learn early in life. Respecting elders isn't just a matter of politeness. It's understanding the value of what they've sacrificed. No one magically has that understanding. It has to be learned with awareness and empathy. Evan hugged me again, slower, tighter. "Mom, I promise I won't let anyone hurt you again." In that moment, I knew the storm wasn't over, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. After receiving the lawsuit threat, I knew I couldn't just sit still and hope everything would calm down. The lies, the baseless accusations, everything was being hurled at me. If I stayed silent, people would assume I was guilty. Linda, my friend who works at a law office, came over that same evening. We sat at the kitchen table laying out every document. Evan sat across from us, his eyes still red but more focused than ever. Linda picked up a file. "Helen, I looked into it. The Hayes family is hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt." She placed another document down. "This is a case file showing their company is being sued for financial fraud. They hid it from Evan, and Melissa never said a word." Then Linda pulled out a printed copy of the prenup. The full version, not the one Melissa had shown Evan before. Clause 14 stood out in the middle of the page. If a divorce occurs within 5 years, the majority of Evan Miller's income will be transferred to Melissa Hayes and Richard Hayes. Evan held his head in his hands, breathing heavily. "Oh my God, I almost signed this." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Now you know. That's what matters." We gathered all the documents into a thick folder. As I looked at it, I knew I had to do something I had avoided for too long, confront things head on. The next day, Evan received an invitation for a reconciliation meeting from Melissa's family. They called it reconciliation, but everyone knew it was an attempt to pressure Evan into fixing the narrative. The meeting was set at an upscale hotel downtown. Evan didn't want me to go. "Mom, they'll just try to blame you again." I smiled slightly. Then let them say it to my face. Before leaving the house, I opened my closet and took out the light blue dress, the one I had bought for the wedding. I stood in front of the mirror for a moment, not to look pretty, but to remind myself that I wasn't some outcast the way Melissa had tried to make me feel. I was still Evan's mother, and I had every right to defend the truth. The hotel conference room was spacious, with a long table at its center. The Hayes family sat at the end, cold, confident. Melissa sat in the middle, perfectly made up, her eyes icy, as if she were the one who had been betrayed. When Evan and I stepped in, none of them stood up. Melissa's father spoke immediately. "We're here to end this. Evan, you will tell the press that all of this was a misunderstanding, and that your mother blew things out of proportion." I said nothing. I placed the folder on the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. The sound of papers rustling was soft, but enough to make everyone pause. I slid the prenup across the table, then the debt documents, then the internal company emails Linda had found. I spoke slowly, clearly. "If we're going to talk today, then we'll talk with the truth." Melissa's father's face turned a deep shade of red. He leaned forward aggressively. "You are slandering my family." I gently rotated the debt file so he could see his name on it. "I didn't write these numbers." The entire room went silent. Melissa sat frozen, refusing to look at any of the documents. Evan finally spoke, his voice calm in a way I hadn't heard in days. I was blind, but not anymore. No one gets to insult or threaten my mother again. I looked at my son, feeling as if 26 years of raising him had culminated in this moment. The Hayes family had nothing left to say, but I knew this wasn't the end. When the truth has been buried too deep, the people who depend on lies often lash out the hardest before they finally give in, and I could feel it. They weren't done yet. They would try even more to salvage their reputation. The meeting at the hotel ended in silence. The Hayes family didn't apologize and didn't admit to anything. They only looked at me with irritation and barely restrained anger, but I knew that confrontation had shaken them. For the first time, they realized I wasn't the timid, fearful mother they had always imagined I would be. After reviewing all the documents, Linda passed them to a friend who worked as an investigative reporter. She examined everything, verified the details, then said bluntly, "This isn't just family drama. This is financial manipulation and deception. The public deserves to know the truth." And just 1 week later, the first article was published. The headline was strong enough to make anyone stop scrolling. "Wedding canceled. Financial exploitation scheme by the Hayes family exposed." The article delved into every detail: the debt records, the unusual prenup, and the internal company emails revealing the family's true intentions. Everything was laid out clearly without exaggeration or distortion. Every line was factual. Within hours, the article spread across social media. Comments started pouring in, but this time, no one was pointing at me. That poor mother. She was treated so badly and then blamed on top of it. The bride and her family are seriously questionable. 65% of his income? That's not a marriage, that's a strategy. Good thing the groom woke up before it was too late. Public opinion shifted quickly. People who had criticized me at the wedding began deleting their comments and leaving apologies. Some even sent messages of encouragement saying they, too, had once been misunderstood by their children because of lies told by others. Evan read every comment, and his expression softened. He sat there quietly for a long moment, then turned to me and said, "Mom, people finally see the truth." I smiled, but my heart wasn't celebrating being vindicated. I was relieved because Evan was finally steady again after such a devastating blow. As for Melissa, she didn't stay silent for long. She posted a soft, blurry photo of herself with light makeup, captioned, "Everyone makes mistakes. Don't believe everything the media twists." But no one was interested in her excuses anymore. One commenter wrote bluntly, "No one can twist a prenup clause. The photos of you hugging your boss 2 weeks ago aren't Photoshop either." Her parents, meanwhile, went completely silent. No response to the press, no posts, no explanations. They retreated into silence as if silence could erase what they had done. That evening, after reading everything from beginning to end, I gently closed my laptop. Not because I wanted to savor some feeling of victory, but because I finally felt relieved of a burden I had carried for too long. And I want to say something small to anyone listening to this story. If you believe the truth deserves to be spoken, even when it comes late, subscribe to the channel to follow more real stories like this. Just a simple reminder, because sometimes the truth doesn't need noise. It just needs to be heard. On the evening the article was published, Evan came by my apartment. He didn't bring anything, didn't call ahead. He simply stood at the door with a quiet, heavy expression. I opened the door, and he stepped in as if he had finally found a place to breathe after days of exhaustion. We sat at the kitchen table where we had eaten hundreds of simple meals together. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes. Only the soft hum of the air conditioner and the warm yellow light above us filled the room. Eventually, Evan spoke first. "Mom, I'm sorry." I looked at him and saw in his eyes regret, maturity, and a kind of sorrow only someone truly wounded could understand. He continued, "I didn't see things clearly. I let other people influence how I thought about you. I'm ashamed. I wish I had listened to you from the beginning." I placed my hand over his and said calmly, "Evan, no one is born knowing how to tell right from wrong instantly. I share part of the blame. I stayed silent for too long. I should have told you how I really felt." Evan shook his head, "But I should have stood by you." I gave him a small smile, the first genuine smile I'd had in weeks. "You are standing by me now. That's what matters." In the quiet of that moment, I suddenly remembered the old letter Evan's father had sent years ago, a memory I had buried deep. I stood up, went into the bedroom, and returned with a small brown box. I opened it and took out the faded envelope. "Evan, this is a letter your father sent many years ago." He looked at me, surprised, anxious. I said gently, "I hid it because I didn't want you to be hurt again, but now you're an adult. You have the right to know." Evan held the letter with both hands. I saw his shoulders tremble as he read the apologies, the vague words of a man who had walked away. When he finished, he set the letter down and sat quietly for a moment. Then he said softly, "Mom, all those years you carried everything alone?" I nodded lightly. "I didn't want you to bear that weight. It was enough for me that you grew up to be a good man." Evan looked at me for a long time, then stood and hugged me. It was a tight, warm, sincere hug, as if he were trying to make up for years of misunderstanding. He whispered, "I promise from today on, I will honor our family the right way. You're the one foundation I must never forget." I couldn't hold back my tears, not from sadness, but from the quiet peace I had waited so long to feel. I believe that in life, people can lose many things: money, jobs, relationships. But family, if nurtured with respect and love, will always be the place we return to. Respecting our elders isn't just a matter of politeness. It's gratitude for the years they gave up so we could have today. As for a mother's love, nothing can replace it. The story of my son and me ends here. But I believe the emotions it carries will linger in each listener a little longer. Life sometimes forces us through painful moments we never asked for, but those very moments help us see more clearly what truly matters. If you still have your parents with you, take a few minutes to call them or stop by just to say hello. Don't wait until the day you realize you've missed the most ordinary, yet most precious things. And if you want to continue following real stories about family, trust, and the decisions that change our entire lives, subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep a small, warm corner for each other in this vast world. Thank you for listening.